Hello, my name is Carolyn Norton. I'm the practice director here at Velosio for Cloud Services, and today I want to talk to you about elevating ROI, the extra perks of cloud migration. And before we talk about what those perks are, I definitely want to take some time to set the table and talk about your common cloud terms because, as always, the cloud is this mysterious entity that everyone seems to know, but I want to make sure we talk about it a little bit more in detail. So, cloud terms. When we talk about cloud, we're talking about cloud components that are hosted outside of your office and not in a private data center. It is located somewhere else, usually with our big cloud providers. Think of Microsoft Azure, for example. That's cloud. But when we take it beyond that, there's different types of cloud. There's cloud services that have your traditional servers that are virtualized in the cloud. Then you have solutions that have no servers and it's more application based, very web oriented. And then there are a multitude of other services that encompass being in the cloud. It can be analytics, it can be just general data, it can be, there's a plethora of things in the cloud that can cover cloud and in terms of its services. So it can be, again, virtual machines, serverless software, platforms are also a scenario where you can host in the cloud. And ultimately, that's what cloud really means. So now that we've talked about what the general cloud terms are and setting that table, I want to take a step back and really talk about what perks you get into the cloud. Now, I don't want to rehash what you've already heard, right? We already know that moving into the cloud is going to be beneficial for a plethora of reasons. You have access to better security. You have a wonderful ecosystem to leverage within your organization. You have the ability to scale and expand and transform your workloads that run your organization inside of the cloud. And you've probably heard something like that when people talk about cloud. But what I really want to take a moment and dive into are some of the perks that are inside of those obvious perks that maybe you're not thinking about when you're thinking about migrating into the cloud. When we're talking about migrating into the cloud, it's really about transformation. You're taking something that you did in your organization in its former way, and ideally what you're doing is you're looking at the way you did it and how do you make it better and how do you make it more efficient and more secure by moving it into the cloud. So again, there's a transformation that's happening there. So some of the perks that you see when you move into the cloud is it gives you ease of business and you're able to do things at scale. And I say that at a high level, but what does that really mean? Well, something that's common today inside of the cloud is you have an organization and you're not the same organization you were a couple of months ago, a year ago, 2-3 years ago. You've evolved and you've grown and maybe you're going through changes, whether it's organic changes or perhaps an acquisition, maybe there's a merger happening. Either way, your company is evolving and growing. And while moving to the cloud, everyone said, oh, this is great for scalability and I can do more with less, or I can have access to tools. What does that mean in the real ROI sense? Well, like I said, you're in your scenario where you're evolving the organization. When you're hit with these scenarios where you're being changed because of an action that happened, or you're changing organically through the life cycle of the organization, you have the ability to make those informed adjustments. So an acquisition, you're bringing a whole separate company into your organization. How do you make that happen? In the traditional sense, you probably had to order hardware, maybe go through a stack of digital data and physical data. How do you introduce, this system and that system? And you have all these different angles that you have to take into consideration. Whereas if you set your organizations up in the cloud, it gives you an opportunity to really ease that in a methodical way where it makes your organization cohesive as you introduce that change. Same thing if you're doing merger, or in some scenarios, let's say you're splitting off a specific portion of the business into something else and it's becoming its own entity. Divesting, being able to slice off the information is a little bit easier now because you're in the cloud. You're ideally tagging everything. You have everything in its structured place, and you can take that information apart and put that over there where it needs to be separate from your organization. So again, these are the different things I want to make sure you're aware of on these additional benefits that can enhance your business ability to be agile and keep up to date with trends. Because you're in the cloud and you've made that migration, you're setting yourself up for these unique scenarios that are traditionally part of the evolution of an organization and makes it easy for you to have a cohesive experience inside of your brand. Now, another thing that is nice about going into the cloud is you're unifying, you have an ability to unify your brand and your identity. And I say that while recognizing that some organizations may not be aware of how important that is. But in a world where your identity, both as an organization and as an individual contributor to the organization, your identity is a key. It's a key to access data, information. It's the identity is a representative of who you are as it relates to the organization that you're working with. And so you want to make sure that you're mindful that that identity is centered around what the organizational brand is, that identity from an end user perspective is easy to use, easy to leverage, and aligns with a unified experience as it relates to the organization. So think about it this way. If you are Jane Doe and you have multiple identities that comprise who you are in the digital ecosystem, it can be challenging to have a singular experience. You probably have access to a plethora of different applications or softwares or tools via these different identities, which can be very much a risk and can compromise your data. But again, it doesn't let you as an organization effectively understand that identity and how it's branded out. So think about that as well, because when you go into the cloud, you have the ability to have a single identity solution. So no more, hey, I have 3 different accounts and here's my one account to access the payroll system. And here is the account for my marketing presence. And here's my other account for this vendor that I interact with, which are all very important roles and responsibilities as part of the identity that I'm using, but they're different identities and they don't build that cohesive user experience, and it doesn't give that cohesive branding for the organization. So again, something to think about as we move in, as we continue to live in this digital ecosystem and this digital landscape, having a unified identity from here's who I am from an organizational perspective and as an end user is very key, and something that may often be unnoticed in the benefits of going into the cloud and making sure that you're recognizing the ROI on there. The other ROI is, hey, you're putting yourself in the proximity of multiple vendors. So the cloud vendors, such as Azure, understand that you're going to do business with other vendors, other software providers, other entities in general. And so their goal is, any cloud provider's goal is going to ultimately be, hey, how do I give you the tool set that you need within our ecosystem, but how can I also collaborate with these other vendors so your organization gets the best out of everything that they're looking for? So again, putting yourself in the cloud is going to put you in a position to succeed and grow and interact with other vendors like it could be Adobe, it could be Box. I mean, there's a plethora of other vendors and providers, some big names, some, specific to your industry or area of expertise. But many of the vendors have recognized that working alongside cloud providers is beneficial for them because it provides their clients and their end users a wonderful experience. Conversely, cloud providers want to make sure that they're working with vendors and providers so that they can have a cohesive experience. So that may not seem like a big deal, but when you're trying to flow data or flow processes or understand, hey, here's my data over here. Again, I'll use payroll example. I have my payroll information over there, but I need to be able to do something over here with that information. And they're two separate vendors, two different data sets. You want to know that you have the ability to interact those two easily and again, make it like a seamless experience for your organization. And these little things, these are just three that I can think of top of mind that are really wonderful ROI wins for your organization, are going to save is going to give more benefit to an organization, save them from probably these little paper cuts that are happening, which are not terribly big, but they add up in the long scheme, in the long run. That can be beneficial from going into the cloud, both in current state, future state, and anything in between when scenarios happen. So I talked about some benefits, and I wanted to talk to you about some experiences that we've had helping organizations do exactly that, unlocking the ROI of the cloud. So I have one example where an organization, again, was already in the cloud and they went through an acquisition phase. And so the question was, hey, I know how to use this tool set. It's working for my organization. We know how to do the day-to-day and these usual use cases, but the concern is, how do we bring this new data set into an existing environment, right? How do we introduce that information? How much of that information are we bringing over? Because we're only allowed to bring in this much information. Usually in an acquisition, it's either it's up to a certain point of data that you're able to bring over, and how do we differentiate that and bring the appropriate information forward? The other thing is, hey, I have a new set of end users that are now going to be part of the acquiring family, right? And how do we introduce those groups into our systems, our tooling, our methodology, so that they can do things in a gradual way, so that they're adopting, again, the new organization's established procedures? How do we bring them into the mix so that they can be productive as soon as that transition occurs? The branding is aligned with the organizational branding. So again, email addresses align with the brand of the organization, the forward-facing brand. Phone numbers, when they're dialing out, does it look like the brand, the organization that's being acquired? And how do we ensure that the data that's being brought in is safe and secure? So that's also the concern that they mentioned. Because again, even though there's an acquisition happening, you want to make sure that the data that's being brought into the environment is not going to cause a compromise or cause any sort of concern. So it was great because we were able to come in and work with other technology professionals who already had an established awareness of their domain. And together we collaborated in making sure that these different aspects of the acquisition was addressed. Again, the unified branding, making sure that the data set that needs to be brought over is brought over. How do we ensure that the data set is safe and secure? And how do we ensure that the user adoption is at its best, right? So make sure that these new folks that are coming in, these resources, are adopting to the environment. And thankfully, working together, it was a successful experience. And as an end user, an acquisition can bring up a range of feelings and emotions. So the fact that this organization was able to provide a smooth, seamless experience for them so that they can transition into what their new organization is and continue the role that they're doing. And then from a leadership perspective, knowing that the decision to acquire this organization was done in a successful manner where data is not lost, the appropriate data is brought in, and we're not introducing any kind of risk or concern is 100% a wonderful experience and a client success story that helps when you're in the cloud and you're working with experts to leverage the power of cloud. Because again, it's not like we're unlocking a new tool inside the cloud. We're just thinking about how to leverage the cloud in this use case so that the end game is accomplished. So that's one scenario which was very positive for an organization. And then conversely, we had a scenario with another client where the organization decided to establish their own entity, their own domain. Again, this one was a little different, where we're working with established professionals and an established that's coming from an established organization. How do we help them stand up this new entity from the ground up? How do we establish, here's, pick your brand. All right, how do we help you establish this new entity and this new brand? How do we ensure that those users and those resources and that data is being taken out and put into this new entity? How do we make sure that during the in-between time, this new organization can run as needed, but it's not so dependent on what they used to have? So how do we enable and empower the organization to drive forward in the momentum of divesting? So that one was also an interesting experience, while similar in nature, like the acquisition story, different in perspective, because now we're building from the ground up. Again, they had an experience in the cloud, so they knew they wanted to start in the cloud. So starting off in the cloud from scratch is far different than when you get an organization that has an established procedure and technology stack. Developing that technology stack from the very beginning, talking through, hey, here's what I did like, and here's some things that I would like to modify in this new entity and identity that I want to put forth for the organization moving forward. So having and the ability to strategize around that and unpack and look at what we can establish that we know existed in the past that we want to try to replicate in this new entity, and then where can we look for areas of improvement or new tool sets that we can leverage. And again, at the end, also make sure that the end user experience is great. So making sure that as they transition from one to the other, they know they're coming into something that they're familiar with, because again, in this scenario, we were mimicking the similar stack that they were using in their own separate environment for this new organization, but also giving them a helping hand to transition and how to change from, I used to be Jane Doe at la.com. Now I'm going to be Jane Doe at, abc.com. I don't know, some other entity name, and how do we help transition that? So that was a really good experience that we were able to leverage. And then other client experience where we've helped organizations where we've worked with other partners. So again, we've had clients who are established in the cloud and they look for vendors that work best with their organization. So when this particular organization elected this vendor to help them out with this particular resource, we came in and collaborated and strategized with this new vendor. Hey, they're in this particular cloud. Here's how everything is established, and let's talk about how do we make this experience cohesive, where you, the vendor that's specializes in this particular thing, can coexist in what's established for this organization's overall technology stack, and make sure that's efficient. And working together, not only were we able to collaborate and make that experience seamless and make it interact with each other as expected, but in talking, we were able to find other avenues that traditionally would not have come up if it was just, hey, I just need you to do this and that. We really talked through, here are other areas that we're leveraging, and how does that work with your tool set? Is there anything we can do there beyond the surface level? And we were able to find out that there were some efficiencies and some processes that we can improve on by having those conversations. So ultimately, we got the client to leverage what they were looking for, but we also gained some additional benefits and efficiencies by having those strategic conversations and getting them to their end goal. So I just want to make sure that you're taking a moment to recognizing that moving into the cloud usually happens through a catalyst. There's a reason behind an organization going into the cloud for whatever reason, compliance, need to redo a workload, whatever. And that's great. That gets you into the cloud. just remember that there are other benefits inside of the cloud that kind of live there in the ecosystem that you're either there's an opportunity to benefit from that, or you're benefiting from it already just as an effect of what you just did for some other reason. So I hope that is helpful for you and that gives you some insight so that you can enjoy the benefits of cloud, and perhaps it'll give you some ideas to think through what other benefits beyond the ones that we know of today that the cloud can do for you and your organization so you can get the most out of your investment.